You may have never heard of the legendary blue creatures that live in my city, but today I'm going to tell you about them. One is a massive evil horse that killed its creator. The other is a giant low poly bear. Obviously. I live in Denver, Colorado, and our airport is one of the weirdest in the world. If you want to know more about that, just look it up on YouTube. As of 2008, though, when you approach the airport, you're greeted by the 32-foot-tall blue Mustang that has been nicknamed Blucifer. I have no idea why. Along with those videos about DIA, you should look up the tragic backstory to the horse as well. Some might think that one large blue animal is enough for one city, but they're wrong. We needed two. The other large animal is officially titled I See What You Mean, but you could probably tell why more people know it as the Big Blue Bear. As you can see, it's got a fun low poly design and is peering curiously into the convention center. I was able to find a low poly bear and a horse in better combat poses online. I will link those in the description if you're curious about them. When I was at the convention center 2 weeks ago for Fan Expo, I saw the bear, and just like any normal person, I imagined it battling Blucifer. So the next step was to make a base for them to fight on. I broke out my hot wire table and I ripped some styrofoam down to the same dimensions as the acrylic base. I needed some elevation for the battle poses to work, so I'll be carving the foam down at a somewhat steep angle. After, of course, gluing the foam pieces together with some foam-safe super glue. I didn't want to have a problem with the acrylic being so smooth, so I roughed it up with some sandpaper and then flame annealed it as well, which is probably overkill, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Once the glue and the foam had become one, it was time to do some carving. Remember to maintain good airflow, proper ventilation, and respiratory protection while working with foam. Foam dust and fumes created by foam may irritate your lungs and cause serious long-term health damage. After a bit of carving, the mountainside was done, and I made sure the pose was good, which it was. So then I made a path for the wires to make it down through the base. These will be for some lasers that will be coming out of Blucifer's eyes. I don't think the full-size Blucifer can actually shoot lasers, but I wouldn't put it past him, especially given all the other things I know about Denver International Airport. After drilling a hole in the acrylic, I heated up a metal rod and I poked that through the foam. Remember to maintain good airflow, proper ventilation, respiratory protection while working with foam. Foam dust and fumes created by foam may irritate your lungs and cause serious long-term health damage. To keep the figures upright and stable later on, I drilled a hole for an anchor pin which will go into their foot. With that ready, it was time to cover the foam with some Mod Podge. This will do two things. For one, it'll provide a layer of protection from spray paint, as well as act as a priming layer of sorts to hold on the next layer, which is Sculptamold. I mixed up a handful of that real quick. With a splash of water, and I applied that to the mountainside. Off camera, I added some more rocks to the mountainside, and once the Mod Podge that I had some time to dry, put on a little bit more Mod Podge and sprinkled on my terrain texture, which in this case is pebbles and sand. When the mountainside had been adequately textured, I sealed that with isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue. It's important that everything is soaked, otherwise it has a higher chance of falling off later. I left that to dry overnight, and I came back to it the next day, and it was ready for some paint, as were the figures, including a little gentleman who I will be adding to help establish the scale. And you'll hear a little bit more about his story, or how he got into this situation in a minute. I took everything outside to prime with a matte black primer, and while I paint these, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons. The setting of the diorama is a rocky hillside. Now that I'm looking at it, it probably should have been a more classic Denver location, or maybe somewhere in Aurora. But Denver's not far from the mountains, so please imagine with me that if two Denver kaiju awoke and battled each other, we could reasonably assume that they would make it to Lookout Mountain before they started fighting. While I was working on this video, I looked it up, and apparently there's another sculpture of a giant animal going up in the River North Arts District in Denver. River North, Rhino for short, and it's a big rhino. But I don't think the plan is to paint it blue, which is kind of a bummer for continuity's sake, but I'm sure it'll look fine in the end. But it's in a similar low poly style to the Big Blue Bear, who, given the lack of standalone details, will not be given any detailing with the brush. Blucifer, on the other hand, who's a beautiful, detailed sculpt by Animal Den Miniatures, is going to be receiving the full mini painting treatment. I think most Coloradans in general have a similar feeling about Blucifer, at least most of the ones that I have talked to, which is nice on one hand because it's a fun meme that unites us, in spite of any other differences. But on the other hand, we have to all see this unsettling blue horse with red eyes when we go to the airport, whether we like it or not. This is Mikey. Mikey is sad. He goes to Lookout Mountain when he needs some alone time to feel better. See, Mike's favorite thing to do in the whole world is watch baseball. And his favorite team is the Rockies. And the Rockies' performance this season has been making him very sad. So he's been spending a lot of time at Lookout Mountain. But today is a special day because he didn't know that Blucifer and the Big Blue Bear would be up here fighting to the death. But it just so happens that they picked his favorite place to carry out their battle. Mikey's super excited to witness this legendary event with his own two eyes, so now he's happy, and he's forgotten about baseball for now. And that's okay. After painting Mikey, I moved on to the detail work on Blucifer. I worked on building up the highlights on the muscles to add some definition, and then I added the dark, unnatural, bulgy veins. After that, the miniatures were done, and it was time to paint the landscape. I gave it a subtle Rocky Mountain red, followed by some tans and earth pigment powders, which I activated with isopropyl alcohol. Finally, I sprinkled over top some dry grass-colored flocking, which I sealed down with more isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue. With the painting of the miniatures and the landscape done, it was now time to light up the horse's eyes. It's not a pleasant comparison, but an accurate one. I gave the horse a catheter from its foot to its head through a hole that I made in the computer before I printed it. I thought it would help make this battle a little more believable to have the lasers coming from Blucifer's eyes. After all, a bear has more natural weapons, so I feel like the lasers help even out the playing field. I assembled a little wiring setup with the negatives connected to a rod that goes through the head, and then the positives connected to each other and the red wire at the other end. With the Mustang ready to be put in place, I threaded the wires down to a battery housing and switch that I had made preparations for off camera. With the wiring ready, the Big Blue Bear was ready to go into position as well, followed by our little Rockies fan, Mikey. The last thing to do is to clean up the sides of the diorama by painting them with black 3.0. And after that, I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time. Remember to maintain good airflow, proper ventilation, respiratory protection while working with foam. Foam doesn't fuse, created by foam, may irritate your lungs and cause serious long-term health damage.